This is a B4 bioenergetics video looking at respiration, and we're looking at aerobic and anaerobic respiration. Let's start off with an introduction to each of those types of respiration. Now, respiration as a process is not breathing. Breathing just allows us to do that gas exchange, get the oxygen we need for respiration, and remove the carbon dioxide we don't need because it was a product of respiration. So there's two types of respiration in humans. There's aerobic, that's with oxygen. So right now, if you're just sitting there, you are aerobically respiring, okay? It's a chemical reaction releasing energy from glucose. So we eat the glucose or we eat the starch and it's broken down into glucose, and that is a chemical store of energy. And what respiration does is it releases the energy from the glucose and we can use that energy in our body. Aerobic respiration is very efficient. It releases lots of energy and it's in the presence of oxygen. So it's when we've got lots of oxygen available to us. So like I said, if you're sitting right now, breathing, not working any muscles, not feeling any of the pain of that lactic acid, then you are aerobically respiring. Okay. Now, anaerobic respiration, this occurs when we exercise or we're lifting heavy bags and we feel that pain of the lactic acid building up. Okay, we're still getting the glucose to the muscles, but we've done so much work, we've used a lot of energy, therefore we need to respire at a faster rate and we can't get enough oxygen to those cells. So we go into anaerobic respiration without oxygen. So we'll try and combat that, and we'll talk about that in the exercise video by breathing faster and deeper, that kind of thing, to get more oxygen to our cells. But if not enough oxygen gets to those cells and our muscles are using the energy, then we go into anaerobic respiration. We know that's happened when we feel that pain in our arms when we're carrying heavy things, or we're running and we feel that pain in our legs. Okay, it's much less efficient. So just to summarise, aerobic respiration, releasing lots of energy from glucose using oxygen. Anaerobic respiration, releasing a little bit of energy from glucose without oxygen. Let's look at a word equation for aerobic respiration. So we can see we've got the glucose, that's the chemical energy store, and from B2 digestion, we know that the glucose, being a small soluble molecule, goes through, it's absorbed through the small intestine, in the villi, through into the blood. Oxygen, we breathe that in, goes through the alveoli in the lungs. Carbon dioxide, again, through the alveoli in the lungs, but going in the reverse way, from the blood to the alveoli. And then both of these processes, in fact all three of these processes, by diffusion. To get the extra bit of glucose across, we use active transport, but you can look at that in the B2 videos. And then water can be removed when we breathe. If you breathe onto your hand, you can feel the water there. Sweating, and also in urine. Now, when it comes to a symbol equation, you'll notice this is the reverse of photosynthesis. So in photosynthesis, we try to remember that glucose is like a sandwich of C6H12O6, and if you put the two slices of bread together, which are 6, you get the 12 in the middle. And then no number goes in front of that to balance it, but there's a 6 in front of all of the other parts of the equation. Okay, so C6H12O6 is the glucose. We need 6 O2 molecules, and from that we produce 6 carbon dioxide molecules and 6 water molecules, 6 H2O molecules. Okay, and that is just the reverse of photosynthesis. So if all else fails, you can think to yourself, okay, what do we take in? We take in the glucose in our food, we take in the oxygen in our lungs, and then the reverse of that is thinking, well, what do plants take in? They take in water in their roots, and they take in carbon dioxide through the stomata of the leaves. Now, we learnt in B1, so we're doing some cross-referencing here, we learnt that respiration occurs in the mitochondria of the cell. Okay, some GCSE textbooks refer to the mitochondria as the powerhouse of the cell. Please do not write that in an exam answer because it will not be accepted, okay? What they mean by that is that lots and lots of energy is being released there, okay? So the mitochondria are floating around in the cytoplasm of the cells, and the reactants needed for respiration, the oxygen and the glucose, diffuse into the mitochondria. Within the mitochondria, respiration, both aerobic and anaerobic, takes place, and the products of that, being the carbon dioxide and the water, diffuse out, and then the energy that's released is used for all of the body functions that we have. Let's just remind ourselves, again, a recap from B2 this time, the structure of the lungs. Okay, so we've got the trachea, that's the windpipe, splits into two, the bronchi. Bronchi is the plural word, bronchus is one. And then they branch out into more bronchioles, lots of branches, and then they end in the air sacs, the alveoli. Okay, now breathing is the important aspect to get the oxygen into the blood. So we breathe in, we have a higher concentration of oxygen inside the alveoli, just here. And so by diffusion, that oxygen moves into the blood, because at this point the blood is deoxygenated. Okay, and the reverse happens with carbon dioxide. There's lots of carbon dioxide in the blood. Remember, the blood is the transport system of the body, moving all of the things around the body that we need to, anything from digested molecules to urea, to hormones, to oxygen, carbon dioxide, okay, lots and lots of things moving through the blood. So the carbon dioxide is higher concentration in the blood, so therefore moves by diffusion into the alveoli of the lungs, and then we breathe it out. We've got adaptations of the alveoli, large surface area, we say it so many times in biology, that allows lots of molecules to move across at any one time. Thin, so it means that the molecules have less distance to travel. There's moisture there because the molecules need to be dissolved. The gases don't move across as gases, they move across as dissolved molecules, and large network of blood capillaries. Lots of places to allow the carbon dioxide to be dropped off and to collect that oxygen. Another B2 recap. This is about the villi. So the villi are important in this case because this is how the glucose gets from the small intestine through the villi into the blood. Again, same adaptations we just talked about, except now we've got microvilli as well, and these allow for even greater surface area. So again, we've got high concentration of glucose inside the small intestine compared to the blood in these capillaries in the villi. So by diffusion, they move from the high concentration inside the small intestine, low concentration in the blood. And then we get to this point of equilibrium. This is what I'm talking about just up here, this extension part. So diffusion moves those glucose molecules from the small intestine into the blood. And then eventually they level out. We get to an equilibrium. The same concentration of glucose in the small intestine and in the blood. So that last push to get as much glucose out of the small intestine as possible, active transport. Okay, so it's not active transport the whole way because that uses energy and that would be a waste of energy. So diffusion for the most part, and the last part is moved over by active transport, which is low concentration to high concentration, using the carrier proteins. It's like those greedy hands pulling in all of those extra molecules. Okay, let's just have a look at the energy changes. So we stated earlier that respiration is the reverse of photosynthesis. If you turn that arrow round, you get the photosynthesis equation. Now, we understood, hopefully, that photosynthesis uses light energy. That's why it's an endothermic process. So if photosynthesis is endothermic and respiration is the reverse of it, it must be exothermic. And that makes a lot of sense because the whole point of respiration is to release energy from that store of glucose. So The breakdown of the glucose in respiration releases energy. It's an exothermic reaction. That's going to be a quick one marker, okay? Photosynthesis, endothermic, respiration, exothermic. So we've released all this energy from the glucose. What do we do with that energy? A lot of it is involved in chemical reactions to build larger molecules, to build up the amino acids and the proteins for growth and repair. We use it for movement and all those kind of bodily functions, and in maintaining body temperature. We are warm-blooded, so we use it for maintaining body temperature. So I mentioned at the beginning that if we're doing lots of exercise and our muscles are using energy, then because they're using more energy, the rate of respiration needs to go up, and sometimes we don't get enough oxygen there. So the next question is, when does aerobic respiration stop? Okay, so when muscles are exercising, they're using more energy. So because of that, initially, when we don't go straight into anaerobic respiration as soon as we start exercising. Initially, our body tries to compensate. So we might be running, we might be carrying heavy bags, and the first thing that happens is the heart beats faster, and that's to supply more glucose and oxygen, and also to remove those waste products from those respiring cells. Okay, so if the heart beats faster, that transport system of blood is faster, delivering more oxygen and more glucose to the cells, where respiration will occur to release the energy to supply those muscles with energy. Breathing rate and breathing volume increase. That means that breathing rate, we breathe more times in a minute, so more breaths per minute, and breathing volume means we breathe in more each time, so bigger breaths, deeper breaths, okay? If there's insufficient oxygen supplied to the muscles, aerobic respiration stops. So we're trying to combat it, okay? We're using more energy, heart rate increases, deliver more oxygen. We're also breathing faster and deeper to try and get more oxygen into the body, more oxygen to those cells for respiration, for aerobic respiration. If we can't do it, if we can't get enough oxygen there, and we're continuing to carry those heavy bags or run that distance, then we go into anaerobic respiration. Now, this still has the presence of glucose, but there's not enough oxygen. So it's in the absence of oxygen, and the product is simply lactic acid. Now, for this one, we do not need to have a symbol equation. Okay, it's inefficient because the oxidation of glucose is incomplete, okay, so it just breaks down into lactic acid, which effectively is just breaking glucose in half, okay. Lactic acid is half of glucose. It's less energy is released, so therefore less efficient. And this lactic acid causes that burning sensation in our muscles, okay, so it could be in whatever muscles it is we're using. It's not going to be all over the body unless you're using all muscles of the body. Okay, and then when we finish exercising, we've got to get rid of that lactic acid, and we'll talk about that when we talk about response to exercise. Okay, so the lactic acid builds up, and then we need to break it down later, and it causes that pain. It makes us want to stop exercising because we don't like the feel of that lactic acid in our muscles. Gives us that burning sensation. But anaerobic respiration only takes place, only kicks into action when there is not enough oxygen getting to the cells. So it's not as soon as we start exercising, it's once we've been exercising for a while, okay? Marathon runners don't go into anaerobic respiration. They're kind of at that level where they can sustain, by their breathing and their increased heart rate, they can sustain aerobic respiration. Your sprinter who is using lots and lots of energy really quickly will go into lactic acid very quickly, because sprinting doesn't last for very long. Okay, if you try to do the kind of 200 meters or 400 meters, that's when you're really pushing yourself, and lactic acid is building up, and that's going to be a very difficult race to run. Hope you found that useful. Thank you.